Nilou is one of the most interesting characters that we've gotten in Genshin Impact to date, as she's the very first character to get her own version of a reaction, and that being the Bloom reaction. However, it does come at the downside of only being able to use Dendro and Hydro characters in your team, which is really only a downside right now because we only have 3 total Dendro characters in the game. But regardless of her limited choice, I still think she's an extremely strong character with even more potential moving forward based on what Dendro characters we get. Hi there, Blossums here, and today we'll be going over our Nilou build guide, the different artifacts you're going to want to be looking out for, different weapons to look out for, as well as her constellations, and we'll be talking about her teams, I guess. There's only 3 Dendro characters, alright, so we're just going to mostly be talking about the Hydro characters, but we will also be discussing what Dendro characters and aspects of Dendro characters to be looking out for moving forward to best accent Nilou's kit. So we got quite a bit to go over, but before we do, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying this type of content. Helps me out a ton and I really appreciate it, but let's go ahead and start off talking about Nilou's kit. First off, we'll start with the absolute core of her kit, the elemental skill, the Dance of Hafkarasvar. I'm doing my best here, I promise. Essentially, when you cast her E-skill, she enters the pirouette state, and when she enters said pirouette state, whether you continue to use your normal attacks or your elemental skill will change up the effect that you get for Nilou based on which one you actually use. So if you continue to use your normal attacks, you end up in the sword dance stance, I guess, and it unleashes a luminous illusion that deals hydro damage to opponents it touches and grants Nilou the lunar prayer effect. Essentially, this effect converts her normal attacks into sword dance techniques, and her final hit will unleash a luminous illusion, and translation here is that it turns your normal attacks into hydro damage that scale off of your max HP. While you're doing all of these steps, by the way, you're dealing hydro damage that scale off your max HP as well, but when you end in the sword dance here, you convert your normal attacks into essentially the attacks you were just doing. But if you continue to use your E-skill, you end up with the whirling steps stance, and Nilou unleashes a whirling water wheel that deals AoE hydro damage and creates a tranquility aura that follows your active character around and applies wet to opponents within its AoE. So this is extremely useful for applying some hydro off the field, as this will follow your other characters whenever you change over to other characters. The sword dance effect will not stay on Nilou or transfer to other units whenever you transfer to them, and it's also extremely important that regardless of what you're doing, if you convert your normal attacks into hydro damage or not, all of this counts as elemental skill damage, so that's very important to note. And if you convert your normal attacks, you can't charge attack anymore, so just remember that one. And as I said, this all scales off your max HP, and the steps are all different scalings here. So if you use her normal attacks here, you get the 7, 8, and 11. If you do the E skill, you get the 5, 6, and 8. And the differences between these actual steps are essentially the E skill does a little bit more AoE, and the sword skill deals a little bit more single target, so you can kind of change it up if you really want to. It mostly matters whichever one you end the stance with, and that's going to determine whether you end up with the lunar prayer effect or if you get the tranquility aura, which have differing durations. If you didn't notice here below, your pirouette itself and the time you have to decide whether you're going to land in the tranquility aura or your lunar prayer is 10 whole seconds there. So you have time to decide. You can interrupt your combo and reposition so you don't get hit by an enemy or something. Take your time to go ahead and do that. But your lunar prayer duration for your normal attacks converting to hydro lasts for 8 seconds, and your tranquility aura duration lasts for a whole 12 seconds, which is pretty nice, allowing you for a solid amount of off-field hydro application. The cooldown here is 18 seconds, but with the time it takes to actually use this skill, your downtime is generally 5 to 6-ish seconds, depending on how fast you actually used it. 6 seconds here if you used it very quickly on your tranquility aura, because the cooldown actually starts for this the moment you cast the E skill. So the moment you enter that pirouette state, it's already doing the cooldown, which is very nice. So the downtime here really isn't too bad. Next up, we'll talk about her Elemental Burst, which has the reoccurring theme of scaling off her max HP. In fact, pretty much all damage from Nilou scales off her max HP in one way or another, except for her basic normal attacks. These are just your typical attack scaling normal attacks, but when you convert them with the E skill, they turn into HP scaling, which is very nice. But essentially, the Elemental Burst and the way it works here is you deal a big instance of AoE Hydro damage that's based off your max HP, and then it marks the targets, and after a small duration, it will deal Hydro damage based off your max HP again. And these have different scalings. You'll see here at level 7, I get 27% on the initial cast and 33% on the second tick there. So those are actually quite considerable, and max HP is going to go a very long way on Nilou, which you'll see be a reoccurring theme as we move into the passives. Cooldown here is 18 seconds, energy cost is 70, and that is a little steep, but overall really isn't that big of a deal because you're not relying on her burst for anything, really. It's not absolutely necessary to get this off cooldown, so while energy recharge is going to benefit you, it is by no means a requirement. Next up, we'll get to the absolute meat of the Nilou kit, and that is the Court of Dancing Petals here, the passive talent. And essentially, and I'll break down this extremely long wall of text. If you're using all Dendro and Hydro characters, the completion of your elemental skill whenever you end with your normal attack or your E skill will grant you the Golden Chalice's bounty for 30 seconds. Characters under that effect will increase elemental mastery of all nearby characters by 100 for 10 seconds whenever they're hit by Dendro attacks. And then your Dendro cores, instead of being the normal cores, are then converted to bountiful cores, and essentially these deal more damage and activate substantially faster. They're basically instant whenever you create the core. They have the same maximum amount of cores you can create, however, but since they're triggering nearly instantly, it's not that big of a difference. The bountiful cores cannot trigger Hyperbloom or Burgeon, so they are different in that way, but you're only getting the bountiful cores anyway if you have all Hydro and Dendro, so it's not that big a deal. Basically, this just says that enemies aren't going to activate Hyperbloom or Burgeon, which they can actually do, so this is nice. This makes sure that the damage you're doing is going to be your bountiful core damage. So yeah, you not only get 100 elemental mastery if you use a Dendro attack, which is awesome, but you get these juiced up version of Dendro cores called bountiful cores that are super awesome, and I really like the way they work. But these bountiful cores don't deal that much damage on their own, now do they? But the real reason these bountiful cores are so good is because of her next passive, the Dreamy Dance of Aeons here. Essentially every 1000 points of Nilou's max HP above 30,000 HP will cause the damage dealt by bountiful cores created by the characters affected by Golden Chalice's bounty to increase by 9%. The maximum increase for this is 400%. So yeah, every 1000 HP you have for Nilou above 30k HP is going to increase the damage those cores do by 9%. So not only are you increasing the damage of your Dendro cores from the 100 elemental mastery that you get for free, you're also going to be increasing the damage those cores actually do based off her max HP. So you're getting free elemental mastery, and then the damage is just getting increased a ton. So if you couldn't tell already, max HP is the way to go on Nilou. So what does this mean for Nilou? How does she play? Well, the nice part about Nilou is you can kind of treat her as more of an on-field character or more of an off-field character depending on the kind of team that you're running, and I think that's going to be one of the most interesting aspects about her when we get more Dendro characters, because it might be more beneficial for you to land on the Sword Dance stance or to land on the Whirling Step stance, depending on what kind of characters you're using in the team. Generally, right now with the Dendro characters we have, you're going to be landing in the Whirling Steps as the AoE Hydro Aura is just extremely valuable, but there's still nothing wrong with ending in the Sword Dance stance. And she's dealing pretty solid damage with those overall, and your cores are absolutely popping off. You can make them deal some ridiculous damage and generate a lot of those cores very quickly. And Nilou is obviously going to benefit the most from characters who can apply Hydro rapidly, as well as characters who can apply Dendro rapidly, just to generate as many cores as quickly as you possibly can, because they're activating so fast. Hitting the maximum can be a little difficult, and honestly, the more you generate, just the more damage you're going to be dealing. She can deal a lot of damage very quickly. It's all really just dependent on how quick you can make those cores happen. So what does that mean for artifact sets and what you're going to want to use? Well, generally speaking, the best kind of set for her is just going to be a split set of something with elemental mastery, and then the tenacity of Milith for the 20% HP. However, it's not your only option, as you can use something like the 4-piece Tenacity of the Millith, considering that your elemental skill when you're doing the pirouette stuff does count as elemental skill damage, meaning that it's actually going to activate the 4-piece here, giving everybody 20% attack and 30% shield strength. This isn't really relevant for her current Bloom teams, just because although the 20% attack is nice, nobody really cares about the shield strength or anything, so it's not necessarily the greatest choice right now. But in the future, should we get like a Dendro shielder or something, or like a Hydro shielder that can actually provide, you know, a shield or something, then that would be a pretty good option as well. But for the most part right now, you're just going to be mixing it up between a 2-piece of Gilded Dreams or a 2-piece of the Wanderer's Troop and a 2-piece of the Tenacity of the Millith. Some people might be asking why not just use like the 4-piece Deepwood Memories for the Dendro shred, and I say why wouldn't you just use that on your Dendro character who's going to be in your Bloom team anyway, and that's pretty much the answer there. I mean, if you really wanted to and you just had cracked HP substats on this set, then go ahead for Nilou, but for the most part, she's really just going to benefit from the EM and the HP. Now, you can obviously still use something like the, where is it here? The Heart of Depth for the 15% Hydro damage bonus if you want her individual damage to be nicer, and that's fine. There's nothing really wrong with that. But do keep in mind, it's very important that sets that increase your normal and charge attack damage are not going to affect her normal attacks when they're converted to Hydro damage, as those still count as elemental skill damage. So keep that in mind. Things like the Heart of Depth or the Gladiator set aren't going to be contributing to Nilou, and a lot of people might be falling for that trap, so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it here. And of course, a 2-piece of the Emblem of Severed Fate isn't bad either. I thought that I would mention that here. 4 pieces, whatever, you don't really need to use that. As I said, our Elemental Burst really isn't that important, but the Energy Recharge could be nice, especially if you want to get that burst off of cooldown a little bit more often. And thankfully, her main stats are very simple, because it pretty much just comes down to triple HP percent. That's really all you need on Nilou. The HP is going to be increasing your damage in general, considering everything scales off your max HP, but it's also going to be increasing the damage your actual Dendro cores do, which is going to be where the majority of your damage comes from. So just having her on full HP is a-okay and going to provide you with a ton of benefits. However, I will say that there's nothing wrong with throwing in a crit rate circlet here, especially if it has good HP substats, as that can allow you to increase her personal damage and really not lose that much HP in the grand scheme of things, but that is also going to depend on your weapon, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Likewise, with something like the Goblet here, you can easily make that Hydro damage bonus if you want to increase her personal damage and have her be dealing more damage, but it is going to lower that Bountiful Core damage, which is going to be a net loss overall. Then the substats you're going to be looking for are quite simple. You're just going to be looking for HP, whether it's flat or the percentage HP, and Elemental Mastery. Those are really the things that matter. Energy Recharge is nice, of course, to get her Elemental Burst more often. And then crit rate and crit damage, I'd say, are still valuable, because if you can get a solid enough crit rate with just her substats or something, and then you're actually increasing her personal damage well enough, because that'll still be a damage increase for you in general and increase her personal damage, which is quite nice, and then you wouldn't have to sacrifice something like an HP circlet or anything. And so crit rate and crit damage are still good, but I would look out for HP percentage for the most part. But remember, if you're using HP percent main stats, you're not going to be able to get HP percent substats, so Elemental Mastery is going to be the most important on those particular artifacts, followed by crit rate and crit damage, and then Energy Recharge lastly as the most important. And remember that attack percent really doesn't matter for her. None of her damage scales off of attack percent, so if you get that, it's just kind of a wasted stat. So for a general breakdown, HP percent is the most important first and foremost. Next up is Elemental Mastery, and then crit rate, crit damage, followed by Energy Recharge for your tier list of substats there. Next up, we'll talk about some weapons for Nilou, and we'll start off with her signature weapon, which is easily going to be the best weapon for her, because this thing is actually just insane. I got lucky enough to get it, and it not only gives you an insane amount of HP percentage from its substat, it gives you 20% on top of that, and then whenever you're using your elemental skill, it increases her elemental mastery based off her max HP and grants some of that elemental mastery to your teammates. This is a ridiculous weapon for her and easily the best in slot on Nilou, but not everybody's lucky enough to get the key of Kajani Soot, nor are are a lot of people going for it as it's only really useful on her and Kuki Shinobu. So what are your other options? Well, I think your next best 5-star option is easily going to be the Primordial Jade Cutter, as it not only gives you 20% HP like the Key of Kajini Sut there, but it also gives you a ton of crit rate, and this allows you to increase her personal damage without really having to invest in crit rate at all, and I think that is incredibly valuable and very nice, especially for people who not only want to deal considerable bloom damage, but also want to deal good Nilou damage. I think this is a really good option for having the best of both worlds there, and my second best pick overall, in my opinion. Beyond her signature weapon and the Primordial Jade Cutter though, the only other 5-star that I think is really valuable on Nilou is going to be something like the Freedom Swarm, due to its Elemental Mastery substat and its pretty good passive overall. I don't think that's a terrible option, and overall will net you some pretty good gains. The other 5-star options are a little lacking though, but there are some appealing 4-stars, and we'll start off with my favorite pick in the 4-stars, which unfortunately, if you weren't here in 1.2 Rip Bozo, you're not going to have access to it, and that's going to be the Festering Desire here, which is pretty good. You get plenty of energy recharge from it, which allows you to ignore investing in it on your substats, and then you get elemental skill damage as well, and an increase in your elemental skill crit rate, which is what the dance steps are based off of. Remember, they're elemental skill damage, so they're getting an increase in damage, and you're getting a little bit of crit rate for them. Overall, a pretty cool weapon because it allows you to get that burst more consistently and deal more damage with what you're primarily going to be using anyway. But hey, you might have not been here in 1.2, and that's okay because you have some great options still. Something like the Iron Sting is going to be awesome because it gives you plenty of elemental mastery and increases your damage overall. Really sick option. And then my next favorite is easily going to be the Sapwood Blade, giving you energy recharge similarly to the Festering Desire, but it also gives you some elemental mastery depending on who picks up its leaf and its passive and all that. And if you have higher refinements of this, then you're really benefiting because that's plenty of elemental mastery and a really nice weapon overall. And those are probably my favorite 4-stars for Nilou, as I think those contribute the most to what she's trying to do, especially in her bloom teams, but things like crit rate and crit damage aren't necessarily awful for her or anything. The passives here, of course, aren't really contributing to Nilou in any way, but if you want to have that personal damage increase, then you of course can. And then there's the energy recharge twins of Sacrificial Sword and Favonius Sword. These are fine, Sacrificial Sword especially because you can help with her uptime on her elemental skill, and then Favonius Sword is nice to generate some extra energy for the team, give her tons of energy recharge as well, and but you do need to invest in your crit rate a bit more to make sure you're proccing that consistently. And then as a potential final option, something like the Dark Iron Sword is in a choice that you can make because it does have elemental mastery on the substat, but the passive here is near useless on Nilou as you're not going to be activating it in a pure bloom team, and the benefit from the passive doesn't really benefit her anyway, so can't really recommend it. But if you're just absolutely in need of an elemental mastery substat sword and you don't have Iron Sting, then Dark Iron Sword's your sword. Next up, we'll talk about our constellations, and I don't always talk about these as they're typically not too relevant on 5-star characters, and Nilou is perfectly fine without any constellations whatsoever. However, these constellations are pretty good, so I thought they were worth mentioning, especially the C1 here, increasing the damage you would deal from your Luminous Illusion there by 65%, which, just to reference, the Luminous Illusion is the final attack on the sword dance steps with the water wheel. So that already scales off your max HP, and then increasing that thing's damage by 65% is pretty awesome. So you can make sure that's dealing a lot of damage. But the more perhaps important part is that it increases the Tranquility Aura's duration by 6 whole seconds, meaning that you have 100% uptime on the Tranquility Aura version of your elemental skill there, because its duration is base 12 seconds, and this is, you know, an extra 6 seconds. The base cooldown is 18 seconds, meaning you're 100% uptime on this, which is really cool. And then we gotta talk about the C2 because it's actually kind of nuts. Basically, when you're affected by the Golden Chalice's effect, which is the effect you get when you land on one of her stances in her E skill, when you deal hydro damage to an opponent, it'll decrease their hydro resistance by 35% for 10 seconds. And then after you trigger a bloom reaction that deals damage to an opponent, their Dendro resistance will be decreased by 35% for 10 seconds. And remember, those Dendro cores are considered Dendro damage, so if you decrease their Dendro resistance by 35%, your subsequent or follow-up Dendro cores are going to be dealing even more damage. So That's pretty incredible and really worth mentioning, as I think that's super strong. But past that, there's nothing really too crazy. I really never recommend C6ing a character or anything. Her C4 is nice, it just gives you some extra energy and whatnot. It also increases a little bit of your damage there. Nothing too crazy or anything, just kind of whatever. The C6, however, is insane, as a C6 should be, because every 1,000 points of max HP, Nilou's crit rate and crit damage are increased by 0.6 and 1.2 respectively, the 1 to 2 ratio there. And you can gain a max of 30 and 60% crit rate and crit damage via this, so that's pretty insane. And if you have this, then you don't have to invest in crit at all, because you're basically just getting it for free. But yeah, as I said, she's a perfectly fine character with absolutely no constellations, but those first couple constellations are pretty good, and I thought they were certainly worth mentioning. And next up, and finally, we'll talk about the team pairings, I guess, and characters you'll want to pair on your Nilou teams. And well, you're fairly limited due to the amount of Dendro characters we have, as I mentioned before. So mostly the Hydro characters that you'll want to pair with Nilou are going to be ones that one scale with max HP, like Nilou, like somebody like Kokomi being the healer for your team, and scaling off max HP is a phenomenal choice for your team. But you could easily use characters like Yelan or Xingqiu as well to increase your damage, but you will be lacking a healer since we don't have any Dendro healers yet. However, I do think Xingqiu there is a totally fine choice for the team, because you at least get the damage resistance and a little bit of healing from him, and that healing is increased by the Hydro resonance bonus for getting that max HP plus 25%. So that overall is pretty solid. And then a character like Barbara is also a really good option, because she scales off max HP as well, and her healing, and could be another way to have off-field Hydro application. But I do think Kokomi is a substantially better option for Nilou, considering Kokomi's E skill has basically no internal cooldown, and you can proc a ton of blooms from Kokomi. So that's really awesome. She also has good personal damage herself from her elemental burst that scales off max HP, especially if you have her built that way. So overall, I think Kokomi is likely the best option here, followed by somebody like Xingqiu and then Barbara. But some of you might be wondering, hey, what about Candace? She scales off max HP and she provides a damage bonus to the team. Well, you're not wrong. Candace is kind of fine with Nilou, but remember that this elemental burst, the way it works is that it increases the damage of your elemental normal attacks. And since Nilou's damage is considered elemental skill, this isn't going to help your Nilou's damage at all, so remember that. But this could be used to help some of your other units and give them some Hydro infused normal attacks, like a Dendro character in the future or something that might pair well with Nilou, who would want some Hydro normal attacks to help them proc bloom more often or something. I could easily see that, but right now Candace and Nilou just don't really meld well, and I couldn't recommend her for your bloom teams. And then of course for Dendro characters, you really only have the options of the Dendro MC and Cole as some of your best options. Dendro MC, of course, being wonderful. Tighnari is fine in these teams, but remember, he's mostly wanting to cause the spread reaction, which isn't going to be happening here. So I wouldn't say he's the best, but he is fine. His Dendro application and all is just, suitable. So what are you going to want to be looking for moving forward for teams involving Nilou in a Dendro character? Well, if you couldn't tell earlier, the most valuable thing for Nilou in the future is easily going to be a Dendro healer. Any sort of Dendro healer that comes up is going to be one of the most valuable pickups in general for pretty much a ton of different Dendro related teams, but for Nilou especially, so that you have more flexibility with your Hydro units in her bloom teams. But other than that, you're mostly going to want to look into Dendro characters that apply Dendro very quickly and consistently off field. That is going to be one of the more valuable things for Nilou, as well as getting that Dendro application is very important to creating as many bountiful cores as possible, and is pretty much a direct DPS increase depending on how quickly they can apply said Dendro. You're also going to want to look for units that have a ton of AoE, because you want to be able to apply said element of Dendro in the largest available area to you. So something like that's really good, or maybe a character that can actually attack with Nilou and apply Dendro in the future would also be phenomenal, but a very big AoE is going to be very useful. I think somebody like the Dendro Archon is going to be very, very good with Nilou, wink, wink. As, the Archon is always a pretty busted character in general. Look at Zhongli and Raiden Shogun and Venti, they're all pretty insane, so I really wouldn't be surprised for the Dendro Archon to be absolutely insane, especially with Nilou here, as she'll be another option for said Bloom teams. But hey, I think that's going to be about it for the video. We talked a ton today, but we got a lot covered on how you want to build your Nilou. Let me know if it helped you build your Nilou in the comments section below. Would like to see all of that and more. Let me know if you're even going for, or if you're just waiting for the Dendro Archon and Layla, as I'm really excited for those banners too. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. My name's Blossoms, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.